Right, so why don't we start off with the impact emerging technologies and artificial intelligence and robotics are going to have on construction. So that's the impact it's going to have. But here's what I'm really interested in, is how can businesses prepare for it? Because I think we all agree that we'd like to be here sometimes, and we've got obviously a couple of stalwarts on the stage who are doing crazy good things, but many businesses are a little bit behind on where we need to be. Who wants to have a crack at that question first off?
I'll go first.
There you
because
go.
You told me I had to.
There we go.
And can I just also say, great to have Doug back with us. Doug's been a tremendous supporter of BIM Oz, and fantastic presentation, mate, and congratulations on what you and your company's been doing. The absolute example of the rise of the superstar. That's what it means. So, anyway, back to your question, Steve. Importantly, I think over our time, if you look at construction, the first thing you've got to do is look out at other industries and then look what's going on and bring that back into construction. And I think so often we are looking at construction like, oh, you can't import buildings, you can't do this, you can't do that. We come from this very internal looking piece. So if it's happening somewhere, in some industry, in some way, it's going to eventually come to our businesses. And we do a lot of things in our businesses that aren't purely construction. There's obviously all that end-to-end piece that goes, including the asset management at the end. So I think just my point is, if you always look out before you look in, that's the best way to start preparing, because it's happening.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that Emma's going to add something to that, but we use a term in technology circles. We call it horizontalisation. And the reason that right now is probably a time where we need to think about that, maybe even more than ever, is because we all share the same factor of production now, which is ones and zeros of digital data. And so what happens is a business that normally would operate in a vertical, that can go sideways. Google did it really well. Think about that. They're basically the yellow pages. That's what Google is. Yellow pages where they said, maybe we can do something better than alphabetical. That's basically what they said. And now they have self-driving cars. And there's quite a leap, but it starts off with information, and then information turns into images, and then images into maps, and then maps into algorithms which can drive the cars, and then self-drive cars. You see how it goes side to side. Emma, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
I totally agree. I call it cross-industry innovation. A lot of the work we're actually doing right now is actually taking a technology that's been very efficient in automotive industry, aerospace, even entertainment. We use 3D Studio Max, for example, to do 4D animations to tell a story how the building will be built and the plan for logistics and safety. The 3D Max is also used by Pixar to do animations and all these nice movies we love to watch. So using a technology that's been increasing efficiencies in the automotive industry, whether it's digital twin or digital prefab or additive manufacturing, can really enrich our processes. It's not really efficient that we look at buildings every time we reinvent the wheel. We can actually learn a lot from other industries to increase our efficiencies and streamline our workflows.
So interesting you say that idea of different industries. I'm going to go off piste here, and I think you've got another one for us, Doug. But you fire away, and then I'll remember this question.
So yeah, I think it's game over. Meaning, every other industry, it's about those companies becoming a technology company to stay relevant. And we've not worried about that in basic construction, to speak. But now with the advent of generative AI, I think in 15 years, if we're not a technology company who happens to do something in the built environment, I don't think you're going to be relevant. And so I think part of this issue is deciding early what the future is, making the bet, and following it.
Yeah. It's interesting because tech used to be a sector.
Yeah.
Now tech is kind of like electricity, isn't it? It's a utility. I mean, in many ways, you even asked, I was asked during the break, some people came up to me, asked me questions about regulation. And it's like, well, it should be regulated like a utility technology because it's that vital to everything that we do. Can I just ask the panel about your recruitment policies? It wasn't one of the questions. I'm going off piste here. Because what's interesting is that you say, Emma, that you look to different industries. What are the recruitment practices that the industry does right now? And are they the right recruit? I mean, obviously you have a lot of engineers, designers, architects, but what should tomorrow's people entering the industry, what sort of a background might they have?
Right. Maybe I'll
Yeah,
start off
absolutely.
with this. I would say, frankly speaking, I think the HR practices within the organization today in Singapore context is still very traditional. We are looking at skill sets coming from the industry. If you are in the AEC, you are looking at engineering, architectural, or construction management. But it's changing. I think we are looking at a skill-based skill set, and rather than a paper recognition today, right? So assuming today, if I were to look at an engineer without an experience on using data set or data analytics skills, as compared to someone as coming from the tech, data analytics, right? I think this is the current challenge that we are facing. And obviously, there needs to be a combination of both. And that's where I think the industry is still struggling with, right? While they understand the bread and butter of the organization or the company is still, building, but at the same time, how then we are able to merge some of these new, I would say, cutting-edge technology, right? Emerging technologies as part of this. So we are still struggling, but I think there's a very clear framework. And the clear framework is making sure that new engineers are coming into the industry, making sure there are talents, and we are using tech as part of it. And the use of emerging technologies is going to be critical in a day-to-day operations or work. So that's very important for us as an organization.
Yeah, when I'm trolling on LinkedIn and I see descriptions for jobs, I don't think I've ever seen one ever that didn't say X amount of industry experience desirable. I would love just want someone to say, no industry experience. We want someone from an entirely different industry to come in here and just twist us up. You know, it feels like we need that.
Well, as we have looked at manufacturing sort of architectural products offsite, this cloud, of the 10 people we have in that group, 1 or 2 came from our traditional AEC or that side of our company. They're coming from aerospace, logistics. I mean, and it's really interesting to be able to have that opportunity because, it's a sister company. And so we're learning a lot by what they bring to the party, but we maybe would not have thought that that would be a normal hire today for our core work. Even though when we get young people, it's great. They come with a lot more coding than any of us understand, who are old as me. And they actually think about the work we do as dumb. And why do you do it this way? And it's really refreshing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the protocol. Tell us what we're doing that's dumb.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's when we get interns, we run a lot of interns through to get the few that we would hire. And we're getting them, in some cases, from non-traditional degrees, not just engineering, construction management, and so on. And as we find the best of those and bring them into the company, they learn while they're an intern that we genuinely want to hear what our industry should do differently. And then they're not shy because they've grown up. They're not completely digital natives yet with that generation, but they just don't. Why can't you build a building from your phone? Why can't you order it from your phone? I mean, they just think so differently than those of us who've been around too long and have a real refreshing conversation about how to change.
Yeah, it really leads me into the next question. Just even that was a great soundbite there. Why can't I build a building from my phone? Someone write that down. Like, that is the stuff that creates attention, right? And then you ask yourselves, well, how do you attract people to your industry, right? Because sadly in today's society, if you ask a teenager what they want to do, they want to be what? Full-time gamer, YouTuber, celebrity chef, right? Sadly, that's what we've come to. Used to be rock star, but now it's YouTuber. So how do we attract people to this industry? Like, what do you do outside of it? Because I talked about how big tech are really great at showing people what they do. How do you do that?
Steve, I think particularly in Australia, we do look to the universities and our graduates and build them from different skill sets. I know that sounds like a long journey, but it is different in the way that our grads that are coming into our organisation are very different to the skill sets that came before them, and they were bright young people as well.
Sure, yeah.
So I think you do look for that because you're looking for that uptake, you're looking for that next generation. You know, Doug's point, you want them also to challenge you and to look at things differently. I think the other thing that's been quite strong, probably particularly in Victoria with the demise of the automation industry, is really seeing those transformational skills come over, particularly in prefab and other areas. So I do think you can cherry pick and look for different skills, but I think if you're really looking for volume next generation, you're looking to not only attract those young people with different skill sets, and definitely from our point of view, you can talk about all the tech types, but they've still got to understand business and got to understand how to put that together. So how you look at that differently, and how you reach into your business and drag them through. That's the other bit. How do you get those people coming into your business and keeping them?
What's the experience in the US? What do you find?
I actually like to highlight about something important in that regard from our perspective. Innovation has two pillars, the people and the technology. So when we hire, and it's really hard to find the talent, we really focus on passion because we can train all the technical things and the technology, but we cannot really train attitude. So you got to have a passion, dedication. If they really love it, and we train them, and they have the basics. DFMA, Design for Manufacture, for example, we started to add VDC. We are hiring, so we started to add in the VDC specs, in the request, if someone has industrial background. And people would ask, it's usually it's architects, mechanical engineers, or other. We are seeing the future as a collaboration between manufacturing and how we can transform that, along with architect and as a developer and everybody. But I really like to highlight the part of the people component, core values in companies about how people can really highlight more the mindset and the attitude in our industry. And that's how we can attract new folks to our industry and excel and push this industry forward.
Yeah, it makes me think about formal education versus informal. I'm formally educated as an economist. All of the stuff that I do to earn my living is the informal stuff, learning to code and robotics and all of those things that I taught myself. I mean, is this an industry where someone needs that piece of paper, that degree? I mean, what's your attitude on that? Because I wonder whether or not we're sending kids to school for 3 years to do degrees, and if that's a good idea. Am I being crazy? Because so many of the things now that you get a degree for, it seems as though you can, if you're self-motivated, you can learn those things yourself. Is this the right model, this university model?
We have a lot of debate about that, and for us it's a blend. That we're not yet ready to go away from what can come through the university system.
I knew it was controversial when I said it, but that's what we're here for, right? We want a challenge.
Yeah, I think one of the things that since we have a lot of people that come to us maybe without university degrees and so on, there's a little bit of work ethic, truthfully, that comes from, I went to school, I got the work done, I got the piece of paper. Along the way, you certainly hope they learn to code and all the things that you want, that maybe sort of the entrepreneurial group can come who learned it themselves. But too many of only entrepreneurs who learned it themselves, I think of them as, if they did that, they've got a lot of motivation. We need a lot of entrepreneurs in our business, but not everybody should be the entrepreneur trying to reinvent something, just to keep process control.
Russell, I'm sensing you want to have a comment here.
Oh, no, I think I'm with Doug. Look, open your mind, look at different things, but I probably just look at the intake of our graduates. They're coming from different backgrounds, and to be honest, don't underestimate. I'm glad you've got the degree in economics, mate, because to be honest, that business degree or that economic degree, we're mostly double degree students. Megatronics is a big thing that's opened up, so that megatronics with a business finance degree or something like that, where you're bringing that entrepreneurial thinking or ability to present your ideas. So definitely from us, it's not giving up on different entry roles, and we've got to be very conscious. We want to create different pathways into our industry, particularly for gender equity and other employment opportunities. We've got to look at things differently. But somewhere in that university space, there's a lot of different talent that need to be directed to our industry, not to other industries if we can do it.
I mean, that's a good point. No,
So it is a war on talent, young talent.
Yeah, there definitely is, and the price for getting young talent's hard. I mean, I guess I really like we said there about just because you've had one door, don't close that door, just open another one, and then you have a greater flow through of talent.
Right. Maybe I like to add here also. I think fundamentally in the industry, especially in Singapore context, the built environment, we still need to continue to have those core skills, engineering, construction, or even architecture. Why is important? We need to make sure that the building doesn't collapse when we build. That's fundamental, right?
It's one of my favourite things about good buildings. It's one of my favourite things.
We need to ensure. I mean, that's our business. But I think this is the key point where I want to put across to the audience. There must be a continuous learning and upskilling and reskilling. This is the important part. And I have to agree with Amir earlier on just now. We talk about how then we retain and attract talents, right? So this is where, the passion comes into play. Individual, where they become motivated to address certain problems via innovation and via digital platforms or technology adoption. I think that's very key. So I wouldn't say let's move away from traditional university degree or whether in the engineering and construction, but I would say there needs to be a balance, and that's where the industry experience will come into play, because each industry have its own set of, I would say, challenges or problem that we need to address. There could be a cross issues that we can try to adopt and try to implement. But I think fundamentally it's not a cookie cutter for each of the industry, whether it's the built environment, the finance sector, manufacturing sector. So we still need a core skill set that is in the industry, especially for the real estate and the built environment.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I always tell my kids too, you're going to university, you can do what you want once you're finished, but you're going. So it's not an anti-education in any stretch. Actually, I used to lecture at Melbourne Uni as well, so there you have it. Okay, so how do we get around? Because time is a classic thing in this industry. You talk about project lead times and when they hit and making sure you deliver that for your clients. How does innovation get addressed in an industry that is known for lack of time and resources and everything is so tight? And we've even seen in the Australian marketplace, a lot of building companies struggle with fixed contracts from times gone by. How do we get around digital transformation in an environment where time is so constrained and timelines and budgets are tight?
Identifying early, you're bringing up a great point, because identifying early long lead items is really critical in delivering projects on time, especially in areas like in New England, for example. I can't imagine that we could have delivered the project at Endicott College without modular construction, because we had that year a snowstorm after snowstorm.
Yeah.
So that would stop the construction on site. But the pre-planning, we were doing it anyway modular, but it really helped us deliver that on time. Yep. On another project, which was prefab as well, we were able to shed 3 months of schedule for a client who needs, so they can start the operations. So identifying long lead items, and with industrialized construction and the QA/QC, what we talked about before, QA/QC overlays during construction can really mitigate the risk of avoiding costly delays and delivering on time, which also reflects positively on protecting our profit margin, and we can deliver in a very efficient way.
Maybe I also like to add, based on our experience, the adoption of technology. In this case, I will touch on 2 key points. One is building information model. One of the use case that we use is to avoid rework on site. And rework, traditionally there's a lot of rework and it taking up a lot of time when we completed the construction, and we found a lot of defects. Now with BIM, actually it helps us to reduce, and we have seen a reduction of about between 20 to 30% reduction of reworks on site, and it continues to increase because the quality is there, where we coordinated most of the services prior to every installation and construction. So that's one. Second, we talk about the process itself. Just now I presented to you guys on just a simple approval process, where it used to take 14 days or up to 21 days contractually for consultant to approve a design. But now with the use of VR, we are able to do it in days or in hours. And our inspection process, in Singapore, we have a lot of inspection process. Previously, it was very laborious. It was very mundane, the use of hard copies on site. Now, mobile-based platform help us to immediately address most of the inspection and the quality issues that we have on site. And this help to reduce most of the time that we are doing on the day-to-day and eventually deliver project on time.
Yeah, Khalil, I mean, that's such an interesting idea. Instead of how do you find the time to innovate? If you innovate, it invents time. So it's kind of that reverse. It's a little bit like what we were talking about before with the innovation. Innovation invents money in terms of the valuations. Do this and it invents time.
I guess, Steve, I'm very envious of Doug being the owner and all the way to MEP maintainer in his case study. Like, it's a marvellous thing. But if you actually take a lot of what came out of Doug's case study, our real challenge is delivery models and appropriate contractual delivery models. So all the things we can do in parallel off-site construction, all the things we can do in early engagement, smarter processes through design, because it is the upfront bit that gives us the result at the end. All those things we do, we let ourselves down generally across the world as not having those right models that we tie back in and deliver things with clients, that integrated project delivery, early involvement, all the things that you can bring value to something. By nature, we do let ourselves down as an industry, and we've got to be stronger about that. We've got to have those models that encourage, the next generation of what we're doing, that understand parallel construction, off-site manufacture, and ultimately understand a net zero result. They're all the things that matter.
Yeah, that parallel design one's interesting. I remember when I used to work in consumer goods, and we used to have waterfall design on projects where you don't do part C until part B is done and so on, and things really drag out. In agile development on tech, it's like, of these 1,000 things we need to do, how many can we do right now? It doesn't matter when it's going to be implemented, you just do it straight away. And that parallel design, I think, is something that from the digital world can be transposed into the physical world and the built environment as well. Such an interesting point. Just speaking of where we're at, obviously government policies have a big impact. And I really love that we've got a panel here where we've got representatives from America and Singapore. I know that Singapore, it's like you actually just email it and it's already approved. Like the moment it's emailed, and then next thing you know, by the afternoon, there's a 30-story high-rise in Singapore. It seems like that. I don't know if you've been there. So what I'd really like to get here, because myself and Russell, obviously we're the locals, and Australia is known for maybe being slow to adopt a lot of technologies, which is ironic because we're an innovative society. Electric vehicles, we're way behind the world in, grid. I mean, you've got countries like Germany with no sunshine whatsoever that have a higher percentage of Z buildings and energy. I just want to tap into government policies and incentives. I'd like to know what you think we do well in whichever country you represent, or who does it well around the world, and what you think we can do better.
Maybe
let's go with Singapore, because I've
Singapore.
given Singapore some big props.
Right,
Maybe you can tell me the truth now. So,
right. So the Building Construction Authority, that's the building authorities in Singapore where they are in charge of implementing some of this policy. Have been very progressive, I would say. They give out fundings and grants to organizations within the built environment industry, and it's very clear that they have a very clear roadmap of where the industry wants to move. And why is that so? Because, again, as what Steve mentioned earlier on, for a small country, we build a lot. And we build fast. Most of our design and build projects goes along between 12 to 16 months. And the adoption of technology is very critical because we do not have a lot of human resource that is available to us, and that's where technology becomes critical. And they need this to be regulated very well. And that's where the government will come in and play a key role to drive all this transformation and adoption. Now, with that, they have a very clear roadmap over the course of 3 to 5 years, and every year they refresh this roadmap. It's part of the Industry Transformation Map, ITM, and the built environment sector is always very critical because it contributes a lot to the economy, given that we have very little space but huge building. trying to support the whole economy and the ecosystem itself. So I would say the government have been very supportive, encouraging with all the grant, and working with interagency between different government, because that could be a showstopper and pitfalls, right? Just a simple use case, just now we talk about the use of 5G technology and network. And that's another government body that is looking into it, not BCA, not the Building Construction Authorities. But the government are able to pull these and making sure they can facilitate effective discussion when this can be implemented for the built environment industry per se. Right.
Why don't we get some of the Australian experience, Russell, before we go overseas and get the US viewpoint, just on government policies and incentives in play in our industry. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, don't get me started, Steve.
Come on, listen, look, we're among friends today. This is
the
Chatham House rules here.
No, one of the best things in Australia is we do look to other countries to see what the good and bad happens. And obviously you called out Singapore as quite a unique country in what it deals with. I guess we're fortunate enough, we've looked heavily to the UK and heavily to the US. And you know, I think if you take those themes, those influences on Australia, you see the entrepreneurial side of the US that drives standards, perhaps a little bit different, so for exemplar and commercial reality, and then you probably see the UK, for example, and Europe being quite prescriptive in trying to set targets and mandates. Where does the Australian government sit? Well, good, we're actually not changing government for a change, so that's always good. I guess we could be doing much more around supporting exemplar delivery. And I can't help it because I'm going to do, you know, the normal BIM-MEP-Oz things, you know, by mandating standards or supporting standards, then you encourage that platform to innovate from. So our government could do a lot more in terms of exemplar projects. The spend that's going through each of the states, spend into things like healthcare, infrastructure, other things, we should be doing a lot more around that. We should be supporting contractual changes and other things that actually lead to innovation. And certainly from a government perspective, we've lost their way a little bit with some of those innovative sort of departments that were set up and don't seem to always really deliver into industry. Having said that, we do a lot of good things, and the quality of what the end product is in Australia is also a pretty important part of that. But government's certainly playing a stronger role with exemplar examples.
It's such an interesting one too, and again, it just seems like there's so many analogies here with the tech industry, because it's so common in Australia for a young innovator who's built a tech to hop on a plane and go to Silicon Valley because they're going to get funded. Whereas here you're going to knock around on the door and you're going to get a 10 times worse valuation, and you're not going to get the investment behind what you do. And I don't think that's just because of the market size in the US. I actually think it's government. Again, we don't support exemplar projects. I mean, for me, that's such an interesting word there, Russell. Well, Doug, tell me about the experience that you see in the US here, because I really like this idea of it's prescriptive in Europe, entrepreneurial in the US, good government support in Singapore. What's your thoughts on your market?
So, you know, we have 50 states and a federal government, and a lot of times there's not synergy between those programs. And so job programs, training programs at the state level sometimes, you know, come and go, can be good, can be missing. Federal mandates around energy policy often can drive states then to follow. And our states often have utility commissions that mandate conservation programs or approve conservation programs through the utilities. So for us, it's a big challenge to knit together all that's possible as an end consumer of trying to grab those resources. You know, they often are there, but it takes a lot of energy to go find them sometimes. I think in the U.S., you know, there's been a lot of conversation about sort of reshoring manufacturing.
Yeah.
And at some point, when the U.S. figures out that if they don't get their game together, we're going to buy buildings in kit form from Singapore. Yeah. Once our government figures out that you can buy buildings anywhere and it's only final assembly on site, once it becomes a manufacturing game, I think they'll get in the game, but they're not there.
Yeah, I mean, that idea again of buying a building in a shipping container, not so different to a car. and reshoring, manufacturing returning to high-cost labour markets seems vital. It leads me on to the next. Did you have anything to add on that, Emma?
Yeah, in terms of moving the building, a lot of the modular things we do is built in Canada. So when they come here, if it's trailers or something for COVID-19, we had to do very quick 1 month projects to do temp housing. So we had to work on all of these to make it US-based. But I'd like to add that 2 months ago, I was in the DC area in Virginia with Geospatial Forum, and we met to do standards for federal buildings. And there were representatives from the federal government to make BIM standards for all of the buildings for federal. So there is an opportunity there and a really great support to start that from a federal point of view and then cascade down to all the states. I'm going to meet again in September. We can't wait for this event. Another piece of that is the grants. In terms of grants, Wendover now we are building that will be the largest CLT mass timber project in Connecticut. Would be the largest one, manufacturing full, it's going to be zero emission, full mass timber project. And we get support in terms of grants to make that project happen. So there is a lot of good support from incentives and as well as from a bigger strategy for making BIM standards as for the industry.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I actually had a modular house built on my farm by Modscape, and we started construction on the 20th of December, and it was installed mid-April. A 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, and it was built in a factory. They just put it on there and plonked it down. It was pretty quick. So let's talk about materials shortages. I mean, it's so interesting now that you talk about almost like cross-fertilizing a build, not just in the raw materials, but getting the pieces from Canada, and then they're getting constructed. And the idea that Singapore might be building houses that are going to go up in Australia. I mean, how does material shortages and the supply chain bottlenecks and rising interest rates, how do they create challenges or opportunities in the built environment?
Maybe I start off with this. Singapore, we were at the mercy of, we have what I would call sandbanks today. Why we have these sandbanks? Because, we don't produce sand. We don't have large area where we have sand. And we were at the mercy of, our neighboring countries where we get the sands from. So to mitigate that, what we have today, we have sandbanks, and sands is very important for us as part of the material. And to manage that cost, the sandbanks are there for the whole construction industry to I would say, take advantage of, rather than be at the mercy of, countries that provide us the sands. That's one. The other thing that we have right now, based on the government approach, we are building an integrated, or what I would call a collective factory for all the precast element. And this is very important because, again, we are a small country, but collectively, as an industry, we need to have a centralized facilities where different companies can share rather than individually investing. And this become a much more collaborative partnership across the different organizations within the industry to tap on the expertise of precast and DFMA for us to make sure that material supply chain disruption won't disrupt the industry as much as how it used to. So these are two ways we mitigate, making sure materials are there for the construction industry to continuously build and not be as disrupted as much as we used to.
Yeah, so Russell, in Australia, we had our supply and cost of raw materials is anywhere up to 30% on a project in the last post-COVID environment?
Yeah, look, a lot gets made of that, and the ability, I guess, in one part of it is, one, getting supply, two, paying something that's acceptable, and reasonable given it. So often we do get looking at, commodity prices and seeing the market almost like overreact on what they are,
right,
and getting that wrong. I think from what we've experienced also, you had the lovely slide up, mate, with the two containers clashing with the US and China slide on. I think, there's a lot of realisation that the disruptor of COVID certainly brought into our supply chain. What's coming out of China having COVID and the ships tied up in the port, when we saw those photos, you start to realise, well, what actually comes from where. And I think, mapping the supply chain is a really important part. Also keeping a constant connection. Look, there's never a better time for relationships, to be honest. When you've got adversity and challenge, ability to collaborate, work with the right partners, really actually start to understand that, guaranteed quality, guaranteed price, guaranteed sort of time delivery, those three things, I know they're old-fashioned, but when you work back through those things, the relationships you play, the people you work with, understanding where your risks are. I mean, I know the work we've done just in mapping all of our supply chain. And what has popped up is some high-performing organisations that you should be doing much more with. It was really interesting when Doug put his slide up, going all the way from owner to MEP delivery, and how you map the supply chain. I think he said 600% markup on.
Cases, right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing that when you actually start to lay it out, you find these things and you start to work a bit differently.
It's interesting, 600% markup. We talk a lot about digital twins and digital twinning of buildings, but digital twinning of supply chain is conceptually interesting and something that I don't know if we do enough of. Doug, what's the experience with material challenges and shortages and prices in the US?
Well, we got sent these questions like you, and what I wrote down was listen to the other panelists, because this has been such a huge problem without solution,
Right.
for the most part. Back to being truthful, when you're a subcontractor, you can have an enormous delivery problem. Just make sure you're not the worst problem on the job site. I mean, seriously, during COVID, a lot of our management process was make sure somebody had a bigger problem than you did, and then your delivery is fine.
Honesty, here it is from
You're right.
Doug, straight up honesty.
Yeah.
Make sure there's a worse performer in the chain.
So a lot of it was for us understanding the other delivery partners on projects in general, where were their bottlenecks, and try to just make sure that our bottlenecks were better than theirs, or better managed. But for us, there was no one solution. Sometimes it was bulk buying several projects together, and that might get the attention of factories to get better deliveries. Sometimes it was, for an off-site manufactured piece of work, we need the materials here. We can't get them until here. That meant we could still hold schedule, but we had to do some work on site. And it was a lot about contract management, and still is. Who bears the cost of the supply chain challenges? In many cases, the contracts were written that we didn't actually bear the cost. So if we had to pay premiums to get materials faster, that the owner ultimately, in wanting the building, they would pay the premiums. So for us, it's been 1,000 points of light to manage this topic with no one solution.
Okay, I think we've only got a couple of minutes left, but one of the things that continues to come up, obviously with building standards globally, is climate and the environment and energy usage. But then on the flip side, we've got an affordability crisis on the other side, and there is infrastructure. I mean, obviously there's operational cost advantages. How do we balance those two things? Because it feels a little bit like at the moment that those two things stretch against each other. We need to move towards more efficient buildings, but the cost of production, how do those two things balance with each other? Because affordability threatens communities and the built environment, and then we've got the climate considerations as well as we move towards new standards.
We actually see a great opportunity with Passive House right now. We're doing a project at Harvard University, and it's a faculty housing for them with existing historic buildings. So all the work we had to pull out all the facade, put it back exactly because it's historic. And it ended up a great passive house project at the end. The amount of effort was really worth it, because when you go there, you can actually maintain the energy. It's really, really low cost, high efficiency in terms of heating that building. So it started to pay off with passive house compared to other things that we've been doing before, without mentioning specific programs. But I see passive house is really pushing towards a real energy efficiency with not so much forward work or cost to put it. It's just a mindset and good planning in pre-construction. And it takes a team, the architect, the mechanical engineer, and the trade partners all together as an IDB project standard. But I see passive house is a great opportunity, at least for us in New England.
Yeah, and Khalil, obviously Singapore is air conditioning only environment. So
That's right.
what's the experience there?
That's right. I think I'll touch a bit on the affordability of housing. I think it's very interesting because recently, Singapore, there's a huge demand, and 90% of the population actually live in public housing and what we term as affordable housing. But it's becoming too expensive over the past years, and it's due to a lot of factors, but one of it is speculative investor. So to address that, the government actually announced a lot of recent cooling measures, and that's why I say the government have been very proactive, making sure that house remain affordable. In terms of the construction itself, the materials, there have been a lot of innovative adoption taking place over the course of the past 10 years. We have started using precast, pre-finishes, toilets, installation, everything, and the design. And houses, I would say, are much more sustainable in terms of the building materials and the incorporation of, solar energy on the roof, predictive maintenance for the lift and the operations of the building itself. So I think that are the two key things that we are looking at in Singapore context, right? And we have been doing well so far. Just need to make sure that we continue this policy and making sure that houses remain affordable for those who really need it in Singapore.
Russell, obviously Australia, housing affordability, massive issue.
Yeah.
Politically sensitive as well, and policy sensitive. What are some of your thoughts on affordability and some of the approaches that the government or the industry might be able to bring together?
Yeah, I guess what we grapple with too, that's the different dynamics around affordability. So I'm sure people have got, we've got young people in the audience. We've got people that've got adult kids trying to get into the market. We've got obviously the need for social housing, and then overlaying that with an increasing interest rate environment that we've had, and then I suppose you look at even the pressures of immigration. Even though we had a whole deferred immigration piece, just the noise that comes out of that political mix and all of that. So I think somewhere in there we've really got to address the social housing piece to look after what we're doing as an organisation. And you see governments announce, and sometimes you read through the announcement and say, we just announced we're going to build 1 million houses by whatever date, and you go, well, they're already going to build 937,000, we're just doing a few more. So somewhere in there we've got to help young people be able to get into the market, and obviously from a social sense. Somewhere in our developments, there's lots of things we could be doing as an industry, containerisation, modular things, different communities we could be building. I think there's a lot of innovation that if the industry got together and actually thought about it and worked with government, I certainly think we could make some inroads into particularly that affordability.
It seems like we don't have a shortage of land in this country.
Well, we've got land, and that's where you look at containerisation, you look at modularisation. Why couldn't we be doing that a little bit differently? Yeah. Equally too, in developments, is there a role for governments to support some offsetting of where affordable housing's being done, as well as building apartments in the middle of CBDs of the city. Yeah. So
more apartments in even fringing areas in the suburbs that everyone has a NIMBY, not in my backyard for the high rise. But in addition, we're so city centric in Australia. We've got 2 cities that have half our population, right? Just 2 cities, and that's one of the things we need more of a diaspora, especially with the work from anywhere environment. So you need this overlay. Doug, some final thoughts, and then we'll thank the panel.
Well, so urbanization is a global issue, and everybody's generally on the track to move to these urban centers, and so it makes the housing problem more of an issue, and the equity side a big deal. So we don't have any answer on housing. We have the same statistics of what is the need, and that the cost is not yet coming down enough. But we have some interesting policies. Washington State just passed a policy that, with very few exceptions, you can put a fourplex on what historically has been a single-family home site. So densification, and it creates an economic engine, so people will then tear down a house or modify it to create 4 living units where only 1 could financially be sold on that property. So we're about to see some really different dynamics that are market-driven with some policy, which is kind of a first.
Okay. Well, why don't we thank our panel? Some really terrific insights there. Thanks so much.